Imagine that you know the exact day you are going to die. Not roughly, exactly. The hour, the place, the weather. Imagine you also know the name of the thing that kills you, and there is no trick, no loophole, no rescue coming. There was a people who believed their gods knew precisely that, every single one of them, down to the detail. They knew which monster would kill which god. They knew the name of the field. They knew the sun would go dark and the earth would burn, and they had known it a very long time, long enough to build a whole civilization on top of the knowledge. So what did those gods do with the news? They forged weapons. They gathered an army. They kept on feasting. They raised a hall with 540 doors and filled it with dead warriors, all of it for one morning. The morning they would walk out of those doors, in gold, in good order, to a battle they had already lost. The Norse called that day Ragnarok, and almost everything you think you know about it is only half the story. You know the wolf. You know the fire giant. A superhero film borrowed the name and gave the whole thing a soundtrack. But you probably do not know what set it in motion. It was not a war. It was a game, a joke, and a small green plant. And you almost certainly do not know how it ends, because the honest answer is that it does not end in fire. It ends in a green field in daylight, with two people walking out of a wood, alive, into a world starting over. By the end of this, you will understand why the Norse hid their single bravest idea inside the worst day in their mythology. Almost everything we have comes from two books, written down in Iceland in the 13th century, long after the last Viking. The first is a poem, the Voluspa, the seeress's prophecy, one of the most frightening things ever written down. A dead woman is hauled out of the ground by Odin and made to speak. And now, verse by verse, in a flat and merciless voice, she tells him exactly how his world ends. The second source is the Prose Edda, written around 1220 by an Icelandic chieftain named Snorri Sturluson. Snorri is a Christian writing a handbook for poets 2 centuries after Iceland gave up the old gods. He is our most detailed source. He is also our least reliable one, because where the poem and the prose disagree, they disagree about the only two things that matter: who dies and how it ends. The word deserves a moment. Ragnarok does not actually mean twilight of the gods. That translation is a beautiful accident. Ragnarok means the fate of the powers, the doom of the gods, a judgment come due. Twilight arrived later from a similar sounding word and a German opera. And there is one more source, and it is not a book at all. It is standing right now in a churchyard in England. A cross of red sandstone 14 feet high in Cumbria, raised around the year 930 by Norsemen who had just become Christians. On one face, Christ upon the cross. On the others, a bound trickster, a woman with a bowl, a god with a horn, a wolf's jaws. A Christian monument with the pagan apocalypse carved up its sides. They did not forget this story when they converted. Now, every ending has a first domino, and this one begins, of all places, with a god that nobody could hate. His name was Baldr, son of Odin and Frigg, the best of them, Snorri says. Bright, beautiful, praised by everyone. Light seemed to come off his skin. He was the joy of Asgard, and then he began to dream. Bad dreams. The same dream, night after night. He was dreaming his own death. And in Asgard, when the Shining One dreams of dying, the gods stop everything and listen. And then they act. His mother, Frigg, went out into the whole world and did something nobody had ever thought to try before. She took an oath from everything, from fire and water, From iron, stone, sickness, poison. From every beast, every bird, every tree. Nothing in creation would harm her son. And it worked. Baldr became untouchable, invulnerable. And so the gods, being gods, turned it into a game. They stood him up in the middle of the assembly, and then they threw things at him, for fun, as an entertainment. Stones bounced off him, arrows glanced away, axes turned aside in the air. It became the happiest sport in Asgard, a god who could not be hurt, a joke with no cost. But one of them was not laughing. Loki, blood brother to Odin himself, and something considerably worse than an enemy. Loki changed his shape into a woman, walked up to Frigg, and made small, friendly, entirely harmless conversation. Everything swore the oath, Frigg told her. Everything, except one small thing. West of Valhalla grows a shoot, mistletoe. It seemed too young to ask, so I never asked it. That was all Loki needed. He went straight out and cut it, a sprig, a dart, barely a weapon at all. Then he found the one god standing at the edge of the game, throwing nothing. Baldr's own brother, Hod. Hod was blind. "Why do you not honor your brother?" said Loki. "Here, I will guide your hand." He pressed the mistletoe into the blind god's grip, and Hod threw. The shaft flew, and Baldr fell. The brightest of all the gods went down, in front of every one of them. Snorri calls it the greatest misfortune ever worked among gods and men. And when it happened, nobody said a word. They stood on holy ground, where no vengeance could be taken. They could not act, they could only look at him. They carried him to his own ship to burn him, and could not launch it. It took a giantess to shove it into the sea. His wife Nanna watched from the shore, and her heart broke in her chest, and she died. They laid her beside him, and Odin bent low over the burning ship and whispered something into his dead son's ear. We are never told what. That whisper becomes the great unanswered riddle of Norse myth. Odin later wins a wager with it, because nobody alive could know the answer. Only Odin, and a corpse. But there was still hope, because Hel, who rules the dead, was not a devil. She could be bargained with. So Hermod, another son of Odin, rode his father's 8-legged horse 9 nights, down valleys so dark he could see nothing, down to Hel's own hall. And there, seated in the place of highest honor, sat Baldr, dead, cared for, and utterly gone. Let him come home, said Hermod, and Hel named her terms, and her terms sounded almost generous. If every single thing in the world weeps for him, he may go back. If even one thing refuses, he stays with me. So messengers went out across all creation, and the world wept. Men wept, beasts wept, the stones wept, the trees wept, iron wept, everything that had ever sworn her oath, everything but one. In a cave sat a single giantess, alone, dry-eyed, and she gave her name as Thok. Thok will weep dry tears for Baldr's burial, she said. I got nothing from him living. Let Hel keep what she holds. And that was that. Then Snorri adds one quiet, devastating line, almost in passing. Most believe, he says, that this was Loki. He killed him twice. Once with a dart, and once while the entire universe was in tears, by simply refusing to cry. Now the gods had nothing to lose, and Loki had nowhere to stand. He ran to the mountains and built a house with 4 doors, to watch for them from every direction. By day he turned himself into a salmon and hid under a waterfall. It did not save him. Nothing was going to. They caught him in a net, by the tail, and they dragged him down into a cave beneath the earth. They bound him across 3 stones with fetters that the poem says were made from the body of his own son. And a giantess fixed a serpent in the rock above his face, so that venom would fall onto him, drop by drop, forever. But Loki's wife, Sigyn, would not leave him. She stands over him in the dark, holding out a bowl, catching every drop. And when the bowl fills, she must turn away to empty it. And in that moment, the venom falls, Loki convulses, and the whole earth shakes. So the trickster lies bound in the dark under the world, waiting. And every chain in this story is now a countdown. And here is where the seeress begins her count. She does not begin with monsters. She begins with people. Brothers will fight and kill one another, she says. Sisters' sons will break the bond of kinship. It will be hard on this earth. An axe age, a sword age, shields split apart, a wind age, a wolf age, and no man, she says, will spare another, not for kinship, not for an oath, not for mercy. Read that again. Before a single monster moves, before any chain breaks, human beings simply stop keeping their word. That is where the apocalypse actually begins, not with fire. With the morning your own brother stops being your brother. Then comes the cold. Snorri calls it the Fimbulwinter, the great winter, the mighty winter, the one that does not break. Snow drives in from every quarter at once. The frost bites deeper than iron, and there is no virtue left in the sun. 3 winters run back to back, with no summer between. 3 winters. No spring, no harvest, twice over. Sit for a moment with what that means on a farm in Iceland. And this may not be a poet's invention. A number of scholars suspect it remembers something that genuinely happened. In the year 536, a haze dimmed the sun across the northern world. Crops failed for years. Some believe that darkness froze into the myth and never thawed. It is only a theory. Then the sky itself is robbed. A wolf runs the sun down across the heavens, catches her, and the light goes out. Another takes the moon. Snorri names them Skoll and Hati, 2 wolves who have run that hunt since the world began. But an older poem says it is Fenrir himself who swallows the sun. The sources disagree, and both of them are ancient. The stars come loose from heaven and go out. The earth shakes until the mountains come apart, and every chain in the 9 worlds, every fetter the gods ever tied, snaps at once. Because that is the terrible logic underneath this myth. Everything the gods buried, they will one day have to face again. And the first thing to come loose is the thing they feared most, Fenrir, the wolf. Another son of Loki, raised inside Asgard because the gods were too proud to fear a cub. He grew, and he grew, until only one god, Tyr, was still brave enough to walk up and bring him his food. They bound him at last with a ribbon, soft as silk, spun from impossible things, and it cost Tyr his right hand. Now the ribbon breaks. The wolf comes out with his jaws stretched from earth to sky, fire running from his eyes. His mouth would gape wider, Snorri says, if there were room. And in the sea his brother wakes, Jormungandr, the serpent so long he circles the entire world and bites his own tail. He hauls himself up out of the water onto the land, thrashing, and the whole ocean climbs the shore behind him. He blows venom across the water and the air. The world begins to drown and to poison long before it ever burns. And on that rising flood, something floats up off the seabed, a ship. And it is the strangest detail in Norse myth. Naglfar, the nail ship, built plank by plank across centuries out of the untrimmed fingernails and toenails of the dead. That is Snorri's own explanation. And he adds a warning in his own voice, like village folklore. If a man dies with his nails uncut, he adds timber to that ship, so cut them. It is the only moment in world mythology where the apocalypse is a household chore that you can personally postpone. And who steers it? The sources split hard. The poem puts Loki at the helm of the ship out of the east. Snorri hands the wheel to a giant called Hrym instead. Then from the south comes fire. Surtr, he is not a god. He is not a frost giant. He is older than either. He has stood at the border of the fire world since before the world was made, holding a sword brighter than the sun. The poem calls it the son of the war gods. Behind him ride the sons of Muspel, in burning ranks, in perfect formation, straight for the rainbow bridge. Bifrost has held against every enemy Asgard ever had. It does not hold now. Under their horses it shatters. And now the seeress shows us 3 roosters crowing at once in 3 different worlds, the strangest alarm ever written. On a hill, a giant named Egther sits playing his harp, cheerful, delighted, watching the world end from a good seat. Above him a red cock crows in the wood. In Odin's hall a golden-combed cock wakes the honored dead. And beneath the earth, at the gates of hell, a 3rd crows, rust red. The hound Garm bays before his cave and hauls against his chain, again and again. It is the loudest sound in the poem. Then Heimdall, who never sleeps, who can hear the grass growing, does the one thing he was set there to do. He raises the Gjallarhorn, the resounding horn, and blows a single blast that reaches every one of the 9 worlds. Yggdrasil, the tree that holds all the worlds on its branches, shudders from root to crown, and nothing, the poem says, is now without fear, not one giant, not one god. Odin rides to Mimir's well and lifts down the severed head that still speaks and asks it for counsel. We are never told what it answers. He already knows. He asks anyway. Then he arms. A helmet of gold, a bright mail coat, and Gungnir, the spear that has never once missed its mark. Behind him ride the Einherjar, the chosen dead, every warrior who ever fell well in battle in all of history. Another poem gives the arithmetic. 540 doors in Valhalla, 800 fighters through each, 432,000 dead men for one morning's work. They ride for a plain called Vgrid, 100 leagues on every side and barely large enough. That number is not describing a field. It is describing how much is coming. And now, at last, the thing every god in Asgard has known about for the entire length of their existence. Odin goes straight for the wolf. He has known since before the beginning of the world that the wolf is his death. He is the wisest being alive. He hanged himself on the world tree for 9 nights to learn it. He traded an eye for it. And on the morning itself, none of it changes anything. The wolf's jaws close, and the All-Father is gone. The poem states it in one flat, unbearable line, and moves on. And Frigg, who already stood and watched one son die, now watches the second grief arrive. She is not spared either. Then a god steps forward who has barely spoken a word in the whole of Norse mythology, Vidar, the Silent One. Snorri gives him a shoe. And that shoe is, without any question, the strangest single object in the entire religion. It is made from every scrap of leather that any human being ever trimmed off a shoe and threw away. Every offcut in all of history has quietly been building that one boot. He plants that foot in the wolf's lower jaw. He takes hold of the upper, and he tears the beast open. The poem tells it differently. There, Vidar drives a sword straight into the heart. Either way, the wolf that took the father is killed by the son, and Odin's death is paid. Across the field, Thor finds his serpent. They have met twice before in Thor's long life. Both times, it got away. Not this time. Mjolnir comes down, the world-serpent dies, and the great coil around the earth goes slack. Thor wins. And then he walks 9 steps through the venom hanging in the air, and he falls. He wins, and he dies anyway. That may be the most Norse sentence ever composed. Freyr meets surtr. And here the story quietly hands him the bill for something he did a very long time ago. He gave away his sword, traded it to a servant to win a giant's daughter. He was warned. He did it anyway. Now the fire arrives, his hand is empty, and he falls. Tyr, the one-handed god, meets the hound Garm at last, and they kill each other, right there on the spot. And Heimdall meets Loki, the watchman and the traitor, enemies since the world was young. They kill each other. Every source agrees. Nobody walks away from that one. And when the field is finished, surtr does the last thing that will ever be done. He flings his fire across the earth. And now come the lines that anybody who has ever read Norse poetry remembers for the rest of their life. The sun turns black. The land sinks down into the sea. The bright stars fall out of the sky and are lost. Steam roars upward, flame roars upward, and fire plays against heaven itself. And then, at last, there is nothing. And that is where almost every retelling stops. The gods die, the world burns, fade to black. And that is exactly where a Norseman would say you have missed the entire point, because the seeress keeps speaking. The poem goes quiet for one long moment, and then, very calmly, it says this: "Now do I see the earth rise up a second time out of the water, and it comes up green. Waterfalls come down the cliffs. An eagle hunts fish above them. There are fish, there are cliffs, there is a world again. And the fields bear grain that nobody planted. All ills grow better," the poem says. And Baldr comes back. Baldr comes back, out of the land of the dead, walking, and his blind brother Hod, who threw the dart, walks with him. The killed and the killer returning together into the sunlight. And the poem says not one word about revenge. They sit down together and they talk. Others survive it. Vidar, who avenged his father. Vali, who avenged his brother. The 2 sons of vengeance still standing. And Thor's sons, Modi and Magni. They walk onto the burnt field, lift Mjolnir out of the ash, and carry it home. The hammer survives. The gods who fought the last battle do not. Their children do. And Honir takes up the wands, because the new world is going to need prophecy too. And then, lying in the long grass of the new earth, the surviving gods find something, and it stops them where they stand. Golden game pieces. The playing pieces they owned in the morning of the world, before any of this ever went wrong. That is the image the poem chooses for the resurrection. Not a throne, not a crown, toys in the grass. And the young gods sit down in the sun and play. There is a hall too, Gimel, roofed with gold and fairer than the sun. The good, the poem says, will live there. And there is another hall, far to the north, on a shore of corpses, its walls woven out of living serpents. Oath-breakers wade through the poison there. Murderers, betrayers. Notice which sins get you in, not unbelief, not doubt. Breaking your word, that was the crime a Norseman feared. And then comes the ending. And the ending is a fight, not inside the myth, but among the scholars who study it. In one manuscript, a mighty one comes from above to hold all power, to rule over everything. Many read that as Christ. That verse is missing from the older manuscript, and many scholars believe a Christian scribe simply wrote him in. Whether the Golden Hall Gimel was ever pagan at all is one of the longest-running arguments in the field. Some see the New Jerusalem straight out of Revelation, others say no. There is no settled answer, and the manuscript we trust most does not end in gold at all. It ends like this. From below, a dark dragon comes flying. Nidhogg, up out of the dark mountains into the new sky. He carries corpses in his wings, and then the sea iris says only, "Now she must sink," and the poem simply stops. Read it one way, and that is a shadow already falling across the green world. Read it the other, and it is the last of the old world flying away, carrying its dead out. 1,000 years of scholarship has not settled which, and I suspect the poet left that door open on purpose. But there is one thing more. 2 people were alive through all of it. In a wood, while the fire took everything else that existed, 2 human beings hid and were not found. Lif and Lithrasir. Their names mean, roughly, life and the one who strives for life. 2 people, 2 words. They ate the morning dew. That is all they had. Dew, a grove of trees, and the end of the world outside. And when it was over, they walked out into a green land. And they had children, and their children had children, and the sun. Before the wolf ever caught up with her, she had borne a daughter, and that daughter now rides her mother's road across a brand new sky. So Ragnarok is not the end of the world. It is the end of a world. And there is an enormous difference. It is a turn of the wheel, a hard, terrible, cleansing turn, and then the wheel keeps right on going, which brings us back to where we started, because the gods knew. That, in the end, is the whole thing. Odin knew for centuries. He built his reign, his hall, and his army around a battle he had been told he would lose. He could have hidden. He could simply have not shown up. Instead, he put on the gold helmet, took up the spear that never misses, and rode straight at the thing that would kill him. Almost no other mythology on earth does this. Most gods are eternal. Most gods are safe. The Norse gods have a death date. They know it, and on the day, they get up and go. And the people who told this story did not find that hopeless. They built their entire code of honor on top of it. Because if the ending is already written, the only thing left in your hands is the manner in which you meet it. You will lose. So will everyone you love. So did the gods. That was never the question. The question is, what you do on the morning you find out, and they answered it. They put on their armor, and they walked out to meet it, knowing exactly what was waiting on the other side. That is Ragnarok, not the fire, not the wolf, not the ending, the walking out. That was always the point. And far beyond all of it, a green field, an eagle over clean water, and gold lying quiet in the grass.